Hey guys, WaifuGate here again. Today, you'll notice that this video is going to be very similar to what we usually do on a weekly basis, which is analyzing 5 lists from like MTG Goldfish or whatever other site we can kind of use. We'll switch to the better one once we find a better one, but as of right now, it's kind of Goldfish. So basically what we do is we look at, for that list, we look at the top 5 lists, or not top 5, but just 5 interesting lists that went 5-0 or 5-1 or whatever for like the standard challenges for Magic the Gathering Online. We kind of see like, what their matchups were, like if they're good or bad versus certain decks, why people were teching certain cards for certain sideboards. And it's more exciting because like sometimes you see like an interesting list as opposed to always what's meta. Like I think this week it was like Sultai midrange was really interesting without Yorion, just Sultai ramp. So like it's interesting to look at those lists. So this time we're taking 5 lists that top 8'd pretty much in the recent MTG Melee Smash tournament, the Red Bull Qualifier. So we're taking a look at decks that did really, really well. So I think that this one came in first, I believe. Yeah, I think so. So Falconetti's list. So we've got Jeskai, Luca, Yorion. Pretty popular list, obviously. Like we knew it was going to be really strong. Maybe we didn't know exactly that it would take like first place here. Straight up. Well, it's actually tied sort of, but tiebreakers, it pulled out ahead. And then second place was Jeskai, Yorion, cycling, etc. So let's just dig into this list. Whoops, that's not digging into the list. So 4 Teferis, 4 Narsets. So this is a little different because the list that I've been running on ladder only has 2 Narsets, and I have more Clarion's main deck. I have like 2 of them, I think. And it's not my list per se, it's just the list that was linked to me as a good list to start with. And there's no glass casket. I think these were solely sideboard for my list as well. And my sideboard's a little different as well. So what we've got here is pretty interesting. Yeah, aside from the Narsets, though, it's pretty much the same. So basically, the idea behind this deck is -2 with Luca onto a token, which your token productions are very, pretty expansive. You've got 4 Omens, the 4 Births, the 4 Shark Typhoons, etc. There's a lot. And your 4 copies of Ardenville, or 3 copies of Ardenville in this list. So just a lot of token generation. And then you just go into an Agent of Treachery and just kind of win from that point. You mulligan mainly for early game plays, land drops, etc. Like Birth is a really good card, etc. And then it just looks to do really powerful plays like Yorion after it cheats out an agent on turn 5 or whatever, if it's allowed to. Like you guys have probably played it on the ladder and stuff, or played against it at least. So it's a very powerful deck. In regards to the sideboard options, it looks like these guys are on the plan of sideboarding out fires and just sort of having a counter magic battle until one of the players resolves a like a Yorion combo, basically, or a more accurately like a Luca combo. So they just go like Luca into Luca -2 onto a token after they like, I veto this and then I dispute that, etc. And then they usually bring in trawlers, I think, too. And then it seems to be like a little help versus aggro here, a little help versus flare. So I think that this variation would rely mostly on taking out the fires completely and then putting in vetoes and putting in I'd say vetoes and Wanderer probably, and Deafening Clarion and Casket against like Jeskai cycling, or just cycling lists in general, like the 4-color cycling, quote unquote, the 4-color, even though it only uses red and white mana. So that's kind of interesting. And then against control, of course, like any other blue deck running Teferi, you bring in the 4 disputes, the 3 vetoes, and you probably sideboard out the fires at that point, so just so you don't have dead cards, and you just play like you white control almost, where you're just holding your cards back until you can kind of combo off. And what's up, Delmo? How are you doing, man? We're doing a YouTube video on the top 5 list, or 5 lists from the Red Bull Qualifier right now. So yeah, pretty interesting list. I mean, it's pretty standard. Seems to be mostly teched for the mirror and the sideboard, and then against some aggro. I'm liking it. Clarion and Casket are also both good against Luris or Obosh Sacrifice, or even Mono Red too. So just not terrible. Seems pretty interesting. So obviously, like, you know, took first place, really strong deck. It took first and second. So, and there's only 1 card difference between these 2 lists, I believe, unless I didn't check the sideboard thoroughly enough. But it was like this one runs, the one that we were looking at, it runs 1 Clarion, and then the other one runs 1 Aether Gust main. That's like the only difference. So, Boros Cycling took 3rd place. So this is a pretty standard list, like nothing too exciting. Zenith Flares, the Fries here for Narsets primarily, sometimes Teferi, 2 Soul Guides for the mirror matchups, just so you can like exile the other person's Zenith Flares, 2 Red Caps for the mirror for anything really, any type of aggro like roll. It's just really nice removal for a lot of planeswalkers too. Like you can even hit a Narset with this and it's probably worth it even though you sack your land. Like so worth it, man. I'd probably bring it in against Jeskai Yorion as well. It also pops Luca, which isn't a super big deal because like if they Luca, they just took one of your lands or something else, so you don't really want to go down, but it's probably fine. These are for the kitty cat decks, of course, like exiling cards. This can also be pretty okay to bring in versus other cycling lists, but it might slow you down too much. Like the exiling a card is kind of cute, but you probably just want to take it all with another Soul Guide Lantern. Embereth, pretty good against Glass Casket, actually. And someone, I think they bring this in too for like Soul Guide Lantern, so you can't just hold it on them, but you just exile in response their graveyard, and then they can Zenith Flare in response to that, but it's like, it's weird. Like they have to set up like the perfect storm in order for that to matter, really. Yeah, kitty cat deck, zombie kitty. Yep. And then Graph Diggers, obviously, for like Luca Fires, for Sakdos, like any like Luros Sakdos it's pretty good against that list as well, so they can't get back cats and such. And of course you have your own Luris, which isn't really a sideboard card. So pretty interesting sideboard, lots of good options here. I like it. And we all know how this deck works for the most part. Cycle, 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 cycle. And that's pretty much the game. And then sometimes after post sideboard, you have some interaction. And you actually have to do a little more thinking. I mean, to be fair, like doing the math behind all of this too, on top of managing your mana perfectly, is a little difficult, but overall, it's like, it's a budget deck too. Like not a lot of rares here aside from the 4 Sacred Foundries. Just really, really solid. So of course, like I expected at least one of these in the top 8, not 2 or 3 in there too. So let's move on to Rakdos Sacrifice. This one took 4th and 5th place. I think they're very similar lists. I remember looking at both of them before we picked out the decks for the video. So here we've got Knight. Knight's awesome. Really like it. So this one forgoes having 3 drops or higher. So like your Mayhem Devils, your Woe Striders, your Midnight Reapers. And instead you run more 2 drops like Dreadhorde, Butcher, Robber, etc. And Priest, you get to run Priest, which is still pretty strong. This has 3 claims, 2 acts, main board. Now, I've never seen that many takeover effects main board. Usually it's like 3 to 4 claims. It's got 2 light up the stage, which is pretty interesting as well. I'd like to see that card a little bit higher up, maybe like 3 or 4 copies, but I understand why it's a little low. The reason being is because you don't have as many 1-drops really to proc that efficiently. Like you don't have Scorch Spitters or anything to like deal 1 damage even through like a block. It's very difficult. Like if the opponent births or something, it can shut off your light up the stage, which makes it a 3 mana like maybe draw 2 cards that are useful type deal and cast them next turn. Whereas like the light up the stage for 1 mana is much more powerful, of course. So And then here they've got 23 lands with 2 castles, which is pretty interesting for late game, 2 scry lands. The rest are shocks and basics. So this guy can kind of carry games. Yeah, and it's pretty standard like Luris for the most part. I just don't recognize having more than 2 or 3 takeover cards main board. Usually it's like 3, but I haven't really looked at a lot of lists. Sideboard seems to be set up mostly for control. You've got the 4 drill bits just to check for board wipes for the most part. Maybe check for a Luca, like a combo piece. 2 Heartless Axe just for any type of a mirror matchup on aggro. Can be useful getting through stuff like Yorion and whatnot, but you kind of want to end the game by turn 4 or 5 anyway. Like you just want to schmork people down for the most part after sideboarding. 2 Embriths just for like Grafdigger's cages and such on the cats. I like it. It's very strong tech. Also blows through glass caskets, which have become more popular in the sideboard process lately. Because if you glass casket the Croxa once it's been like escaped, that like blowing up the glass casket could just end the game, because if your opponent can't discard a non-land, they just die sometimes if you're chipping away at their health with like cats and such. So I like that. I really feel like they're overcommitting to the whole like taking over your stuff type deal, especially since they don't have like a lot of sack outlets. Like they've got Priest and Witch's Oven, and that's like it for the most part. Normally you'd have like Woe Strider or something else that's a little more reliable for the sack outlet, like something that doesn't need haste. So I don't think I agree with the amount, but maybe it's okay. I mean, it did top 8, so probably doing something right. I just feel like the sideboard could be slightly more optimized for like basically just being more decisive on what you want. This can destroy target colorless non-land permanent. What's that useful for? I guess it's just 2 damage to something though, for 2 mana. Or for 3 mana. You can shock for 3 mana. It seems pretty bad. It's also a body, so something to consider. And you can bring it back with Luris, so that's really cute. But yeah, I'd like to know what this is teched for, primarily. Like Soul Guide Lantern, but you don't really care about it. Oh, I guess Grafdigger's Cage. It's like a more different Embrith that can deal damage instead. So that's kind of interesting, actually. Because it can blow up Grafdiggers. Alright, Mono Green Stompy. So this was a pretty interesting list. I like the Vivian. I like this a lot. And they have Vivian, more Vivian sideboard as well. Basically a Vivian tribal deck, which is pretty awesome. I can get behind it. So 4 Gem Razors, 4 Stonecoil Steve Austin Serpents, Barkhide Trolls, just a lot of 4-ofs here. 3 Questing Beasts, 3 Arvos, and 2 Wildborns. 3 Henge, 24 lands. And then they've got some interesting tech for the sideboard. So basically just looks to set up really aggressive turns. Turn 1 Pelt Collector, turn 2 Barkhide, etc. Or Growth Chambers. Lots of card advantage with the Growth Chambers and the Planeswalkers and such. Like with this many creatures main deck and hardly any artifacts or anything, like the Vivian will of the Wilds can find you some creatures for sure. You're able to cast it, so that's interesting. I like that a lot. So yep, I like it. Just a lot of card advantage too with Great Henge and Growth Chamber. It's really explosive, and Stonecoil like puts decks through so many issues. The only thing that can really block it efficiently is sometimes like a huge snake, and even at that point they're usually like, because most lists that run Shark Typhoon are called Jeskai Yorion, and they can't ramp, you know what I mean? Like the ramp that they do is grabbing a Plains with Birth to hit their land drop. That's their ramp. So it's not like they're playing above you in curve. So like your Stonecoil is always going to be a little bit relevant versus, especially since they can't bounce it with Teferi or anything, they have to just kill it, or they have to like glass casket it or something, you know? It requires them to answer it though. And glass caskets are like a 2 or 3 of total in the 95 for those Yorion lists. So pretty steep order to try to get those consistently. And you might have to use it on like a Pelt Collector or Growth Chamber or something early. And then Stonecoil comes down for 4. Mutate Gem Razor onto that, and it's just game over. because then it's just too big of a body and it has protection from multicolored at that point. No Teferi bounce or anything. Very sad. So I like like it seems very simple game plan wise, but you have a lot of interaction that you normally wouldn't with mono green. I like it. This has reach too, which is fantastic. It's just really, really big. Because then if you have extra mana and you're just sort of like needing your threats to be juicier, you can just juice them up, and it's just nice. All right, let's check out the sideboard. Target creature you control deals damage to its power to target creature you don't control. If the creature you control has trample, excess damage is dealt to that creature's controller. So pretty interesting. So like Pelt Collector procs that, Stone Coil procs it. Especially since this is monocolored, you can actually hit your Stone Coil with it, which is awesome. Questing Beast has Trample, which is nice, so that'll proc on that. Anything that you +1 Vivian has Trample until the end of turn, so that's relevant there to push through lethal or push through a lot of damage. Ceratops are awesome. I'm surprised these aren't main deck, but I can kind of understand why compared to Questing Beast or Yorvo or something. Like, lots of good options. It's hard to pick and choose, you know? Vivian's is sort of nice, gives you some longevity in those control matches. Just a little too slow, I think, for Jeskai Yorion, though. I don't know when you bring this in, honestly. Because I don't know if I bring this in against Jeskai Yorion, because they just kind of, like... They just kind of wreck you. Like, they'll just take control of it. It's like, oh, thanks. And, like, you don't have any reaction to that. You just have to play aggro. The art's really cool. I do like the art. It's just like I don't understand this in the meta. I guess versus other monster decks, it's kind of okay. If you need longevity, things to block, etc., it's okay, but I don't know. 2 Soul Guides, pretty good. And then this is just a fat Hydra that also gives you interaction on the table, which is nice. Just built-in fight effect is great. And Soul Guide's obviously here for Zenith Flare, just so they don't auto-lose to that card, and it's pretty relevant versus like Luris. Not terrible. So I am going to give this list a try at some point on stream. I really do like it. I'll probably do it like tomorrow or the next day. And enjoying this list, like the idea of this list for a while. I think the Gem Razors are a tough craft, but other than that, it's pretty fine. I think I already have 2 or 3 of them, so. And this took, Mono Green took, what was it? 8th. And then Jeskai Winota barely didn't make it into the top 8, I think, is what happened. It was like top 10, which is pretty close. So 4 agents. Oh, this is Jeskai Winota, but with green. Okay, so we've got Goose and we've got Grazer for accelerants. With Grazer here, is that you have to have extra lands. So you have to have like 3 or 4 lands for this to be good. Otherwise, you're not playing Winota on 4 because you just won't have it. You won't have the green mana to be able to like you won't have the extra mana to both play a land drop extra for Grazer and have the land drop for your 4th turn, which is super important with Winota. Otherwise, you can't cast it, right? So the 4 Neoforms, nice, yeah. Yeah, I might check out this deck. This deck looks super funny. The land base looks like it could be very Betrayal, like top 10 anime Betrayal type territory, but I guess with the Triome, it's really not that bad because you have both 2 sets of Triomes if you want it. 2 Forests. You really want your forest to be untapped though, so I can understand the extra copies of the temples, like the shock lands for green, especially like Breeding Pool and stuff, compared to the Triome here, which has to come into play tapped. Very tough. Like you want a turn 1 Ragan or turn 2 Ragan after you Goose turn 1 or Grazer turn 1, and then just kind of chill out. And you've got War Boss, Hanged Executioners, Alaros, which just produces a bunch of tokens too. It gives you some staying power versus a board wipe, so you can kind of refuel it. And then 2 Kenrith is pretty interesting too, just so you can bring back Winota. Actually, I don't think you have any black here. I don't think you're allowed to. Just too greedy. The mana base, so no resurrection, so scrap that. Just there for life gain, there for card draw. And you can actually put 1/1 counters on creatures. Could be relevant, like you can play around Clarions and stuff in that sense for some of your dudes. And the Neoform just being able to cheat out Kenrith is pretty cool too. Or cheat out anyone really. Like is super sweet. You're able to like neoform the Grazer into a to like what, Prince Charming, I guess. It's pretty cool. Okay, so they're set up just to combo off game one. One Sevilla Triome. Oh yeah, you could play one Triome for sure if you really wanted to. The problem with that is like in this meta, they'll just grab, we have Black from Goose. That's a good point. That is a good point, G-Man. I agree with that. That's actually a really good point. And you'd have it with Paradise Druid too if you're running that, but it looks like they're not. Yeah, you could also run like one Triumph for black as well. Just different options, really. Just in a meta where people can like kind of steal your lands to like late game, you might not have access to it anyway, where it would be kind of relevant. But even then, it's kind of whatever. All right, so we've got, for our sideboard, we've got 3 disputes, 4 vetoes. I really like 4 disputes, but I can understand it. It's like you really want to avoid Teferi so you can keep up vetoes and stuff to protect your board state. So vetoes and disputes mainly for that Jeskai, Yorian, Luca stuff. 2 Gust for the same, pretty much, and against the mirror matchups like aggro in general. Gust is pretty good against like Gruul Fires, which was pretty popular for a while. I don't really know what this card does. Oh yeah, I remember it now. Destroy target artifact or it gains haste. So it's like a more different Embereth Shieldbreaker, where you can like swing in for lethal if it's close. Or you can proc, especially in this list, you can proc Winota with this as a backup secondary thing, which is way stronger than just an Embereth Shieldbreaker that comes down for 2 mana as a 2/1 for the most part. And I think the Shieldbreakers might be human as well, if I'm not mistaken. So not great for Winota anyway. So just a really strong card in this list for a sideboard. I don't really understand the Magistrate. Like, can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. It shuts off Yorian, sure, but it doesn't do the same type of stuff like that shuts down other types of lists. Like normally you see Graph Diggers or Hushbringer, but that shuts off all of your cards too, so it's really bad. Looks like he plays one of them. Yeah, the Ketria. Yeah. Yeah, you could play like one of the black ones instead if you wanted to. It's just like with this type of the deck, the Triomes are kind of dangerous because you really want to play Winota on curve. And if you go like turn 1 Grazer, and then play a land your next turn, that's 3 lands. If your 4th land that you happen to draw into is a Triome, you can't Winota Slam, which is like what you want to do on 4 or on 3. You know? Like you want to be able to accelerate that guy out. So when you do something like a Triome, like if you add another Triome or you replace this Triome with worse colors, it could get pretty dangerous. It's like this could be the not the Tamir Rek, but the Sultai one for black if you really wanted it to be. 1 less red source, but 1 option for Penrith someday. It's like you have to outweigh the 1 in 10 times that the Triome might be useful to resurrect a dude, compared to the 1 in 10 times. These are statistics that I'm making up. 50% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So that's something you have to consider, like 1 out of 10 times where the land will actually screw you color-wise, like you needed the red mana and you don't have it. So it's just something you have to consider pretty heavily. Oh, nice, Lavinia. Nice. Each opponent can't cast non-creature spells with a converted mana cost greater than the number of lands that player controls. Cast a spell if no mana was spent to cast it, counter it. And this is kind of okay. Like, because it stops fires from being fires, which is neat, but I don't really agree with this one so much. This one's a little weird. Like, I'd rather just strengthen up and play 4 copies of our really good cards, like Dispute, maybe bring Gust up to 3 instead of having these little tech cards. Like, this is cute, but I don't think this is good. I think these are good, and these could be Scorching potentially, but I can also understand just bringing this in against aggro, since you don't have to really worry about it. Like if you had Fire Prophecy's main deck, that's when I would consider, like, you know, Scorching Dragonfire over Fire Prophecy in the sideboard. You only bring it in when it's relevant, so Scorching isn't as relevant in that sense. Like, that makes sense, right? Like, if it was main board, I would consider something else, but since it's sideboard, it's fine. Just because it fits, because you're only going to bring it in when it's useful, instead of something that's main deck, which could be useful main deck, but also could just be dead. Like Scorching Dragonfires, generally just, it hits more cards because it can hit walkers too, is the idea. But since it's in your sideboard, only bring it in versus aggro, and I understand it. So yeah, that'll be the top, like we just took 5 lists that were pretty much from the top 8. The only one that I didn't, because there are a lot of copies, like you see Luca, Cycle, Sac, Luca, Cycle, Mono Green. I just took another unique deck, which was Jeskai Winota here. We could have done Mono Red Obosh, but we kind of know what that list does. And this Jeskai Winota list was actually kind of interesting with its land choices and including the green to ramp. I might actually check out a version of that because it looks like it could be more fun than Jeskai Luca overall. But yeah, we'll see what happens. So appreciate you guys chilling out and checking out the video. If you guys have any questions, you can feel free to drop them down in the comments below, or simply stop by my stream. I stream pretty much every day except for like Mondays and Tuesdays usually. And yeah, you can just stop by and we can talk or whatever. But appreciate you guys chilling out. Hopefully it was useful, and we'll be doing more stuff like this in the future. Like, there'll always be a top 5 list or a 5-0 analysis each week, and then if there's a big tournament, we will also cover the big tournament. We'll probably do like Fridays always 5-0 lists, and then Saturdays like the other lists that we compare the 5 meta lists to. On a side note, my predictions for this, like the Red Bull tournament, we had Jeskai Luca as one of them, Boros Cycling, I think I had Luris as well, and I had Winota. I forget what the other one was. I think I said Tamir Elementals was going to be big and making the top 5 or something, but we were very close. We hit 4 out of 5 on our predictions, so that was awesome. So appreciate you guys chilling out, and I will see you guys on the next video.